Today we're looking at the book Happy by Derren Brown. I'm going to boil it down to you in this short video into 5 main takeaway points you can apply to your own life. If you don't know Derren Brown, he's a British illusionist with several shows doing tricks and psychological experiments on the general public. But he's also an author, and in this book he's delving into happiness. Derren leans heavily on stoic philosophy and also Epicureanism to lead the way for the guide to happiness, and how it is still very applicable to the modern world we live in, also with the idea that happiness is a chimera. It is imaginary and deceiving in many of its forms, that happiness isn't what we happen to have, it is fundamentally about who we are. So let's get into these takeaways. Number 1 is about what we want. Everything we need is easy to procure, while the things we desire but don't need are more difficult to obtain. An interesting thought experiment is to imagine you woke up and everybody has disappeared. You are the last person on Earth, but everything still remains as it was. All the buildings, houses, stores, cars, the electricity still worked. The world would be exactly the same, except all other people have now gone. What changes would you make as to what you wanted and acquired on the material front? In this world, you could live in any house and drive any car you wanted. The question is, would you still want those things with nobody around? Well, probably not. Instead of the biggest and best house you could find, you'd probably go for something more practical and comfortable. Why own an expensive car, fancy clothes and jewellery? We would end up living a life more authentic to ourselves. This thought experiment shows us that what we choose to own and the lifestyle we lead, we do so with other people in mind. One way or another, we project a style designed to make others admire or envy us. In the accumulation of material things, no deep satisfaction is to be found, other than fleeting pleasure and a temporary delight of impressing others. Both of these are short-lived and ultimately controlled by other people or things. The things we desire really do little other than fuel further desires and teach us what greed is. Do not spoil what you have by desiring what you have not. Remember that what you have now was once among the things you only hope for. True happiness comes from accepting what we have or what we can reasonably expect to acquire over the course of our lives. Number 2 is to focus on what you can control. You can't change the world around you, but you can change how you react to it. Emotions are anything but permanent and constantly changing in reaction to external events. But external events and other people don't control our emotional reactions, we do. Our perception and interpretation is what leads to the emotion. Say a friend has been ghosting you for a few weeks. Your mind will run wild with explanations why. You feel hurt, confused and angry. But imagine they then call you apologising, explaining they've not been in touch because of a family emergency. Suddenly, the resentment evaporates and you now feel sympathy. The situation and event was the same. It's the subjective stories we tell ourselves about our experiences that changed. It wasn't the friend's behaviour that hurt you, but your interpretation of their behaviour. This involves around learning to let go of the things you can't control and learn to view your emotions and uncover why you're experiencing that particular one. Letting go is at the centre of Stoicism, accepting life and situations as they are. And as great philosopher Epictetus saw it, there are only 2 things we have control over in this world: our thoughts and our actions. Everything else is out of our control. We are looking to tie our well-being to our own actions, not those of others. Next time you find yourself confronted with a problem, ask yourself which category it falls into. If it concerns your thoughts and actions, you can try to change it. If it concerns anything else, accept that it's beyond your control and move on. It may sound like a simple hack, but it's truly liberating. Number 3 is to focus on performance instead of outcomes. This leads on from the previous point. In most situations, we have limited control over outcomes. Let's look at a job and going for promotion. You can work on your actions of hard work and making sure superiors know how much effort you put into projects, which will help increase your chance for promotion, but they won't make it a certainty. This doesn't mean to call quits and not bother trying. The point is that it's counterproductive to worry about things you can't control. With this, it's important to emphasise tenacity, not perfection. You can imagine someone trying to give up smoking. Say they've given up for 2 weeks, but recently had a wobble and smoked some cigarettes. If focused on perfection, giving up for good, they may well look at it as having failed and take up the habit again and quit trying to stop. However, if understanding that perfection can be the enemy of good, knowing relapses happen and one moment of weakness doesn't mean failure, it means they can move on and try again. We can only guarantee success in trying our best. The desired outcome in the world may prove impossible, but having succeeded in our private aims, we won't be ruined by a feeling of crushing failure. I apply this in my own life. Even with this YouTube channel, I have no control over how many views or subscribers I'll get in a week. All I can do is the best in the videos I make and work hard at it. That is all I can control and what I should base my success on. Number 4 is to preserve your peace of mind. Curb your curiosity. We are ultimately made happier by being less angry. Seneca writes, "Do you want to avoid losing your temper? Well, resist the impulse to be curious. The man who tries to find out what's been said against him, who seeks to unearth spiteful gossip, even when engaged in privately, is destroying their own peace of mind." Plutarch says, "I also tried to cut back a bit on my nosiness. I mean, knowing every single detail about everything, investigating and eliciting a slave's every occupation, a friend's every action, a son's every pastime, a wife's every whisper. This leads to many outbursts of anger, one after another every day, and these in turn add up to habitual discontent and surliness. Very many men manufacture complaints, either by suspecting what is untrue or by exaggerating the unimportant. Anger often comes to us, but more often we come to it. Never should we summon it. Even if it falls on us, it should be cast off. When you feel like you're going to explode in anger, take a deep breath, count to 10, and wait for your anger to dissipate before reacting. This is basic impulse control, but it's amazing how effectively it diffuses tricky confrontational situations. Number 5 is expectations. Anger is just proof of how unrealistic your expectations were. Lowering our expectations of the people around us is not to live at their whim and let them get away with anything. It is to stop obtruding our stories and priorities upon those of others, and then whining when they don't match up. This doesn't just apply to people, but also to events. Of course, it's harder to get excited about a future event if we keep reminding ourselves it might not happen. We're so indoctrinated against the idea of pessimism that it might seem as if we were actively denying ourselves a source of happiness. But consider the alternative. When we become very excited about a future event, we forget the present and place ourselves in the future. We're at the mercy of something outside of our control. Whether or not the event happens as we would wish, it may turn out better than expected, or roughly the same or worse. The more excited we are, the more likely it is to fail to meet our expectations, in the same way that something we dread is likely to not be half as bad as we feared. The Stoics would not deny us feelings of excitement, but they would encourage us to retain this little reminder that we are ultimately not in control. And this is done with a view to increasing our happiness. If the event turns out to be a success, then that's a wonderful bonus. If it's less than we might have otherwise hoped, we'll be pleased we kept our expectations in check. And of course, this reminder reflects the reality of the recurring diagonal. We may aim high, but fate will do its own thing. This also applies to the ideas we have of our future life. The belief that we would be extremely happy if we were extremely rich is so widespread that it's worth repeating. After the point of being financially comfortable, more money does not make you happier. Money constitutes a relationship, and like any relationship, we need a certain amount of mindfulness in place to get it right. Derren says his happiness seems to be no more attached to what he earns, once past that watershed point of not having money troubles, than it does to his wallpaper, and he knows more than his fair share of wealthy people that will tell you the same. Armstrong, meanwhile, makes a refreshing point. He says we should pay attention to what we need. He emphatically does not mean by this that we should simply be frugal. Instead, as part of a considered life, he suggests we become more aware of what our priorities are, what we need to flourish. Some commodities will help us do that, and they may indeed be expensive or appear luxurious to others. Advertisers will tell us what we require to feel good about ourselves, but those things don't correlate with what we actually need to do ourselves justice. Meanwhile, we continue to seek renown because perhaps the accumulation of riches and popularity effectively distracts us from the fact that at some point we must give it all up and leave this earth. Palaces are most beautiful when viewed from afar, and stars shine most brightly from a distance. Fame and riches should only ever be seen as a fortuitous side effect, but they are more likely to come if you focus on developing what is under your control, your talent and energy. Shifting our expectations to work with reality, reminding ourselves that things may not work out as we expect, that we may lose the things we value, that things come and go. All this we know is to aim for a kind of tranquility. Now, this is a great book, and there are so many more great takeaways from it, so I'd really recommend giving it a read. If we actually implement a lot of this into our lives rather than just read or listen to it, then it can really have a positive impact. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.